GCI introduces fellows to design thinking, a human-centered approach to problem solving that provides a framework to develop and execute impactful Glocal Service Projects. And by Glocal, we mean the ability to think globally but act locally, to develop solutions in the fellows' home community. At the summit, students collaborate and work together in teams to focus on solutions to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This is done through a one-day intensive workshop and field project at the summit, where students learn the core principles and process of design thinking. Two of the most resonant aspects of design thinking within the GCI method are empathy and innovative thinking. Open minds are necessary to both unlock latent ideas and put yourself in another's shoes. The workshop begins with the how might we question. How might we educate youth? How might we alleviate poverty? The question continues to get honed and narrowed down to a defined audience for which students can identify practical and realistic solutions that they are capable of achieving through their Glocal Service Projects. So what is the role of design thinking in forming a global leader? We believe the framework fosters better understanding of different perspectives, the ability to listen carefully, synthesize information, collaborate, and take action. No doubt you'll find connections to these themes in other parts of the GCI method. What follows are some short but poignant excerpts from the Summit Workshop Day that should serve to familiarize you with both design thinking and the steps we take to introduce fellows to it.
Whenever you're designing something, it turns out that the process that you go through, this interesting creative problem-solving methodology, can actually be harnessed and applied to lots of other fields, not necessarily only those traditionally associated with the field of design. So the phrase design thinking came up to refer to this way of thinking that designers use in order to go about their designing of stuff. And it turns out that no matter what you're doing or what profession you're in, you can use some tools from the design thinking methodology to create awesome, wonderful changes in the world. So that's why we today are going to think about using the design thinking methodology, something that came historically out of the field of design, and we're going to see how we can apply it to other non-designy topics. So then, jumping right in. First step of the design thinking process, empathize. Building empathy for the people that you're designing for. Designers like to say that you can't design anything for anyone until you take the time to understand the person that you're designing for. So we're going to start with just that. Luckily, a bunch of you guys have the better part of 2 decades of experience of building empathy for other people, and you know how to do this rather well, and we're going to do this today in conversation. So your first task is going to be to interview each other about your favorite food.
Chicken burger.
So I love pesto. Pesto pasta. So yeah, I got
What kind of fries? Turkey fries?
No.
What is actually, what is the pasta look like? How it is? What are the ingredients?
All right.
So eavesdropping on the fellows interviewing each other, you can overhear them describing their favorite foods and the aspects of these foods that they like. Julie loves pesto pasta, and Wunmi loves chicken burgers and curly fries. This is a good first step, but it's sort of limited to a superficial level. Design thinking requires deeper questions and also deeper context. So we just had some lovely conversation. We talked to each other about our favorite food. Raise your hand if you actually heard some information pertaining to your partner's favorite food. Okay, good. Nobody was talking about other random stuff. Raise your hand if you know exactly what you're going to design now. So there was a couple troublemakers and overachievers that are just, for the rest of us, looks like the rest of the process still has something to give us. In order to think about how do you go forward from here, consider the following example analogy for a moment. Say I lived over here on the mainland, and I asked you, the designer, to build me a bridge that goes over here to an island. Mainland over there, island over here. I asked you to build me a bridge. What are some questions you need to get answered before you can get going on this thing? Yes? The depth of the water, right? That's important. Got to figure out how tall the piers need to be. Just shout them out. The budget, right? Like how we're building this thing out of straw or concrete. How far is it, right? Like the distance kind of matters a lot and relates to the budget. Yeah.
How many cars need to pass by?
How many cars, right? So how that's going to determine how wide it needs to be and the durability of the materials and everything. Yeah.
The weather in the area.
The weather, right? Like what kind of winds are we expecting here? Yeah, that's important.
What do you expect to use the bridge for? As in, are you transporting a lot of things by trucks, exporting things?
Right. Or like, are there trains? Or is there pedestrian traffic? Okay, great. So we can go down this road for a while. Okay, so say you asked me all those questions, and I answered them to your satisfaction. So now we know exactly how deep the water is, and here's the wind speed, and here's the height that the boats need to pass, and here's the durability, and here's the budget and timeline. And you heard all those things, and say it was $8 million and 2 years and whatever, and you built me the bridge. The first important thing to realize is you just did a good job. There's nothing wrong with what you just did. I asked you for a bridge, you gave me a bridge. It's a great, wonderful bridge. But what if, in the very beginning, before you started building the bridge, you asked me, hey, why do you need a bridge in the first place? And what if I told you, oh, it's because I need to get from the mainland to the island? Okay, at this point, your ideas in your head are probably multiplying, because how many other ways can I think of to get from the mainland to the island? Just shout them out. How can I get from the mainland to the island? Boat, ferry, fly, swim, tunnel. What was over here? Jetpack?
A kayak.
Kayak. Underground road. Walking on water. Yeah, invent some cool water walking shoes. Okay, so here are two things to notice about what just happened. One, we seem to be having a lot more fun coming up with these ideas than when we were thinking about budgets, materials, and timelines. Number two is we, in fact, are now having a lot more really interesting, creative, and innovative ideas. So we're having more fun and we're coming up with better ideas, and the only thing we did to get here is ask a simple question, why? Okay, so that worked once. Let's try it again. Why do you need to get to the island in the first place? And what if I told you, oh, it's because I need to deliver this message? Okay. What other ideas can you now have for how I can deliver a message from the mainland to the island that may or may not involve any of those things? Carrier pigeon. So, message in a bottle. What? What'd you say? Email.
Yeah.
Screaming out really loud.
Have get Wi-Fi on the island.
Wi-Fi.
Drum circle.
Drones. Drum circle. Yeah. Smoke signals. Yeah, okay. Okay, so again, notice two things. One, we're having a lot more fun coming up with these interesting ideas. And two, the ideas themselves are more creative, interesting, and innovative. And the only thing we did to get here is ask the simple question, why? So here's the third interesting thing to notice, besides it's more fun and the ideas are more creative. So we just spent $0 and 10 seconds of our life sending an email, which, as it turns out, fulfilled the same exact function that the bridge did, which cost us 2 years to build and $10 million. So not only is it the case that we're having more fun coming up with these ideas, not only is it the case that the ideas are more interesting and creative, but in fact, they are objectively more efficient, better use of resources, and probably better for the environment and the world. And the only thing we did is ask the simple question, why? So why is that the asking the question why really works? It turns out that as a designer, if you spend some time digging a little bit deeper behind the first several requests or responses that you get from the person for whom you're designing, and if you really bother to think about, hey, what can I learn about the needs, the desires, the motivations, the values of the person for whom I'm designing, turns out way more fun and way better ideas. So I'll give you another few minutes in conversation. See if you can find out any interesting, meaningful stories from your partner's life that relate to your favorite food, and see if you can design for that. Because people do this really interesting thing when they tell stories. Into these stories, we like to pack all kinds of really important insights about ourselves that we don't even know we're conveying. So, for example, if I told you, hey, this really annoying thing happened to me yesterday. Immediately you know two things. You know what happened to me yesterday, right? And you also know something about what I find annoying. Right? And that second thing is another separate, interesting, valid data point that clues you in a little bit about who I am as a person, helps you understand me better, and therefore design something for me that I will be more likely to love and use in my life.
Pasta. It's pasta with a sauce, but the sauce just really brings back memories of when I went to Italy for the first time.
Oh, I see.
So when I went to Italy for the first time, and it really reminds me of like my grandma, who's a really good cook. So
Already we can see that we're understanding why Julie loves pesto pasta so much. She's sharing stories now. There's an emotional connection that we can explore and ultimately account for in a design to enhance her pesto pasta eating experience. We're now moving to step number 2, which is define. Define is an opportunity to, well, define a specific challenge or opportunity that you want to work on. And this is really a moment in which you get to capture the findings that you made in your interview phases. The way this is going to work for us this morning is as a series of complete the sentence prompts. So if you want to flip to the next page in your handouts, what we have there is a series of complete the blank sentences. So starting at the top of the page, it's interesting or surprising or telling that they blank. One thing that seems to be interesting to them is blank. I wonder if this means blank. This stage really is just your moment to reflect, digest, analyze, think about what the information might mean. As soon as you're done with the top box on the page, you can move at your own pace to the bottom box on the page. And in this bottom box, we set up some how might we questions for ourselves. How might we questions are questions that designers ask ourselves in order to prepare for the idea generation step that's going to happen next. A good how might we question takes a specific problem or challenge or opportunity that you noticed in the experience that your partner has with their favorite food and asks how we can make it better. So when we asked, how might we deliver a message from the mainland to the island? That was a pretty nice how might we question because it was pretty specific, right? You know what topic we're talking about. And yet it was still open-ended enough that you can come up with lots of different answers, right? Carrier pigeons, smoke signals, whatever. All we want coming out of this step is just one nice how might we question. And I gave you room there to come up with 3 just so you can play with wording, try out different, things. So all you want really is to get to one nice how might we question that you like. Overthinking it is one of the major pitfalls of the define step that can trip people up. To combat that, especially for the purpose of this exercise, I give them very little time to do it in, about 4 minutes, and just force them to unload their ideas on the page. Now then, that right there was the define step of the design thinking process, which leads you naturally into the ideate step of the design thinking process. Ideate just means come up with ideas. We couldn't fit the whole phrase into the hexagon, so we came up with one word for it. So this is the stage where you come up with ideas, and here's how we're going to do this today. Today, the way we're going to come up with ideas is by drawing them. It turns out that a large chunk of your brain, many neurons, are dedicated primarily to visual processing rather than verbal processing. So if you think visually, if you allow yourself to come up with ideas by drawing rather than by writing, you're just inviting those parts of the brain to join you in this creative problem-solving approach. So using your visual thinking in addition to your verbal thinking just helps you bring more of your mental horsepower to the challenge at hand. Push yourself a variety. It's okay if all 6 are bad. Take 4 minutes to do it. Take your Sharpie and have fun. In the workshop, we delve deeper into ideating strategies for success, but one of the biggest is to silence your self-criticism. When brainstorming, it's important to put even the bad ideas down on the sticky note because those lesser ideas could be the rungs on the ladder to better and better ones. An imaginative idea that might be outlandish, silly, unfeasible, or just plain weird could easily be the gateway to a far more innovative and effective idea that you would not have had originally.
Let's just do.
Now, we're all just going to together admit and acknowledge that most of the ideas in the room right now are terrible. And that's fine. So let go of whatever embarrassment you have about that, because remember, the ideas that your partner is going to show you are equally terrible. So your job, when I give you a couple of minutes to share your ideas with your partner, is not to try to convince your partner about how awesome your ideas are, because remember, they're probably not. Instead, your job is to get feedback. Your job is to learn from your partner which ideas are working, why, which ideas are not working, why not. As you move forward in the design thinking process and iterate on those ideas and refine them, you want to know which are the most promising ones, which ones need to be smashed together into a new mega idea. So as quick, I'm not going to give you that much time, so as quickly as you can, just rattle through your ideas, point to the illustrations to help describe them, and then spend most of your time listening. The lessons of the previous steps shouldn't be forgotten when refining ideas, empathy being the big one. Interviewers still need to see from their interviewee's point of view, and not just forge ahead simply with the idea that they're most excited about. Now then, we move forward to the next step of the design thinking process, which is my personal favorite, prototype. Prototype is your chance to make your idea tangible. It is your chance to iterate, make a new revision, a new draft. And this time, rather than just sketching and keeping things in 2 dimensions, we're going to bring your ideas to life a little bit. So your task in the next little bit is going to be to make a physical, tangible representation of your idea that your partner can interact with. The goal in the prototype stage is to make something tangible and experiential to help further refine their idea with their partner. If the idea isn't an object, let's say it's an app, the student could draw a series of pictures to represent the interface. If it's something enormous like a restaurant, the student could focus on a small piece of it, like a menu or a table. By manipulating materials, students are forced to think with their hands as well.
Okay, so my favorite food is sushi and sashimi. So my partner came up with this thing. It's like a water bottle. It's insulated, so you can put the sushi meat inside, so it'll stay cold, so you won't get food poisoning.
Very considerate.
Yeah. And it's like easy to clean, so you can like take it on the go. And
After building these prototypes, we had students share them with the class. In the real world, like when they tackle their Glocal Service Projects, these steps will obviously take much longer and might involve revisiting previous steps as new information is learned. Eventually, the prototype step will lead to the test phase, where the fellow would test his or her best prototype with a user in the real world. In addition to the classroom workshop, we also gave them a challenge in the field to put their newfound skills to the test. The challenge was to come up with a solution to radically improve the public transportation experience in and around Harvard Square. A lot more is covered in the entire workshop, but these are the rudiments of design thinking that coalesce into other areas of the GCI method. Fellows then apply what they learned to their Glocal Service Projects. For example, Tomas wanted to increase communication between distinct socioeconomic segments within Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. He implemented a project called Musically United Students and Teachers, or MUST, where a group of students gather together and connect through music, culminating with a concert at the end of each school year. Another example is Karishma from Mombasa, Kenya. Karishma wanted to provide access to clean water to those in her community who lacked access. She created an affordable water filter for under $10, implemented it in her village, and has since filed a patent on her device.